thank you all for hanging around. I hope we get your money's worth on this one. You know, I was telling Trish, I take my car in last week to get it all checked out. Everything's fine. I go out this morning, and luckily I don't live that far from here. The battery's dead. So, you know, I gave myself about 30 minutes to get here, knowing it only takes me about 5 or 10 minutes. But yeah, so I tried to, you know, I got my own little thing. I tried to get it going, and then I tried to get a neighbor. No luck. So luckily I called my wife. She was able to come home, switch cars. So I know what I'm going to be doing this afternoon when I'm done here. I'm going to go home and replace the battery. So yeah, the talk today, the Sun City, a community that changed the nation. Have any of you seen this talk before? Okay, well, I have a lot of information in here that I generally cut off at about 30 minutes. But since I delayed you, and you've been nice enough to stick around, I'll do the whole version for as long as you want and show you as many pictures as you would like. How many of you have been over to the Del Webb Sun City Museum? Oh, great, fantastic. Recently? What'd you think? It's a lot of fun, isn't it? It's pretty cool. When you go in there, you step back into time, and that's what we're going to be doing today with this. So first of all, a little bit about me. Bret McKeand, I heard Paul saying a little bit about me. My background is I spent 40 years with the independent newspapers. I retired, and yeah, I don't have anything to do all day. And I could have went out yesterday and the battery could have died, but no, it chose to die on the day that I actually have something to do. But I was with the Independent for 40 years. I started as a reporter in 1983 with the Sun City Independent. Ended up working my way up, I guess, or just doing more stuff. Editor, publisher, retired a couple years ago as president of the entire group of newspapers, community newspapers that we have here in the Valley. So a lot of these photos, most of the photos are from the Historical Society, the Del Webb Sun City Museum archives, but there are a lot of photos in here interspersed that I took over the last 40 years or so. So we're going to go ahead and get our story started. Hopefully this will work for me. It doesn't. They never do. Also, little shameless plug here. If you go to the museum, we do have some gifts. And one of the books we sell is this book, which we published in 2010 along with the 50th anniversary of Sun City. It's a book that actually Paul and I were asked to put together in a bigger format, and things didn't work out. So we ended up doing this version, which you can get it on Amazon or any of your favorite bookstores or over at the museum. So a lot of the photos you're going to be seeing are from this book. So let's start our story with what the land looked like before there was Sun City. Excuse me. If you happen to come across a map of Arizona prior to 1960, and you look in the Northwest Valley, you'll see Peoria. You might see Surprise. Surprise was there, a lot smaller than it is today, but you won't see Sun City. Where Sun City's at, you'll see a little mark for a town called Marinette. Marinette is where Sun City now exists. And two businessmen from Wisconsin originally owned most of the land in the 1800s. They came out here from Marinette, Wisconsin. So that's where they ended up buying the land. R.P. Davey purchased the land and began growing cotton on it. He sold the land to Marinette Ranch, which eventually was sold to the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in 1920. People who worked the land lived in Marinette, and eventually the town had its own school, cotton gin, and 2 stores. The ranch was eventually sold to the J.G. Boswell Company in 1940. You remember that name because you're going to hear that name a lot throughout the talk. Water was supplied by this Marinette Canal, located about 5 miles north of where Sun City now exists. Water became more and more scarce, and by the 1950s, little farming was going on in the area of of Marinette. Meanwhile, to the west of the small town of Marinette, a guy named Ben Schiefler in 1955 started his own community. It was called Youngtown, and it actually was the nation's very first senior-only community. So that's Youngtown. But unlike what Sun City was going to be doing, you'll notice there are no rec centers. There's just a collection of homes, and you had to be older than 55 to live in any one of those homes. But they had no amenities whatsoever. They had a lake. Had a lake there.
And this is the same Youngtown today?
Yes, yes. But by 1959, the Del Webb Corporation had purchased all of the land that Marinette existed. They had purchased it from the Boswell Company. And they had envisioned a new community, a new retirement community, an active adult retirement community, one that was different than Youngtown. So this is in, I think, about July of 1959. And you can see them building what would become Sun City. That's Grand Avenue. And that is what's left of the town of Marinette. It was still there in 1960 when Sun City opened. It was being dismantled. We had
that cross street there?
This one right here?
Yeah.
That's 107th. And you'll see that in a few seconds. We had a founding member. I think she was a founding member of the Historical Society, but she was on our board for a while. Her name was Amanda Durant. Amanda was, we think, the only person that we had ever known who lived in both Marinette and Sun City. She passed away a few years ago, but Amanda grew up in Marinette. Her dad was the postmaster. She went to school there, and then when she retired, she actually lived in Sun City. There's a picture of her in our museum pointing to a diagram of Marinette and where her house was when she grew up. This is the only thing that's left of Marinette. If you go to, there's a church on 105th Avenue and just south of Grand, and in the parking lot there's a boulder and a monument that signifies this was basically the downtown of Marinette. So it's about 103rd and Grand. I think a church is right next to rec center is now owned. They just built a new rec center there, right, Paul? It's called the Grand Center. This is Amanda. I'm sorry, I forgot I had this picture. So that was Amanda, and again, she passed away 2 or 3 years ago. But she's pointing to where her house, where she lived, growing up as a young girl. And we have a great exhibit in the museum explaining Marinette and how it had grown over the last 100 years or whatever as a farming community. So Del Webb. Of course, Del Webb was the founder of Sun City, he and his company. He was a builder of air bases, hotels, casinos, hospitals. But before 1959, the closest he had ever come to building a residential community, actually, I should back up a little bit. He was also a baseball player. He wanted to be a baseball player. He had to end his baseball career when he was young because of his father's business, which wasn't doing too well. But he did get back into baseball in 1946. Any of you remember or have heard of a small team called the New York Yankees? Del Webb owned them. He purchased them in 1946, owned them for 20 years, and during those 20 years, that team had won 10 World Series. So really, it was the heyday of the New York Yankees. The greatest players of the game, Yogi Berra, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, they all played for Del Webb. And if you go to our museum, we have a great room saluting Del Webb and telling his life's history and all the great things he had done. And we have a wonderful collection of baseball bats signed by many of those Yankee teams. I love this photo because I'm a big IndyCar fan. In 1960, when he opened Sun City, he promoted it heavily, and he also sponsored an IndyCar in the 1960 Indianapolis 500, which finished third.
Which is Del Webb in that?
This is Del Webb. This is Bob Wilkie, the gentleman who owned the IndyCar that Roger Ward drove. Got himself a Time magazine cover, because I think this was in 1963. I have to go back and look at that. Excuse me. He was a friend of celebrities, Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Lawrence Welk. If you live in Sun City and you see all these great roads that are named after what you think are celebrities, that's exactly what they're named after his friends. Welk Drive, Hope Drive, Snead Drive for Sam Snead. And we do have a statue of Del Webb at Bell Recreation Center on the corner of 99th and Bell Road. We don't know what he's pointing to. I don't think anybody ever figured that out. But so 1959, the start of Sun City. Webb purchases the Boswell land, and his people convince him to build an active adult retirement community. This is James Boswell, Del Webb, and some of the Webb folks. Nothing like it had ever been built before. Amenities built first, not promised to come later, as in a lot of retirement communities that were being built at that time throughout the country. The land was still being farmed in Marinette while the Webb team began to build the community in July of 1959. So this is an aerial view of the community being built, 107th and Grand Avenue. This is around October of 1959. So this is Sun City, Marinette over here, and that's Youngtown over there. So you're looking south. I'm not sure. It was Highway 60, obviously. I don't know if it was called Grand Avenue by that point in time. But this photo is actually taken from Grand Avenue. So this is 107th Avenue. That's the grocery store that was being built. And you'll see the recreation center in the background. But this would have been the entrance going into Sun City off of Grand Avenue. Now, I will tell you that the Webb folks, when they decided to build this community, the people who worked for his company weren't really happy about it. They had done some studies throughout the country, and a couple things came back in all the studies. Number one, the survey showed that older people would not move away from their families. No matter where they were at, they would not move away to a new community and leave their families back in the Midwest or the East. And the other thing the survey showed that it wouldn't be a winning proposition because more people would be dying than be moving in. So that was the image of retirement back in 1959, 1960. We were all really, really old people, right? And we wouldn't be able to keep up with it. This is Oakmont Recreation Center, the swimming pool. Oakmont is on Oakmont Drive. And you'll start to see photos here. This is the swimming pool, Oakmont. And then these are the 5 model homes that were being built that would be open on January 1st, 1960. The very first one is where the Del Webb Sun City Museum now exists. Del Webb, the company, did not have a name for Sun City almost up to a couple months before it even opened. They ran a contest. This sign, I believe, was in Peoria. But they ran a contest to name that community. And I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they had thousands of people submit names. 5 people submitted the name Sun City. And Del Webb was walking through his office when somebody mentioned it, and he said, that's the name. We're going with that. Those 5 people all received a model home, and none of them actually took it and moved into Sun City. So January 1st, 1960, opening day. The Webb folks didn't know what to expect. They had done some advertising, but they just didn't know what to expect. This was a new concept. And again, the whole idea was to build the amenities first. Retirement centers, active adult communities have been built, especially in Florida, but people were never happy with them because they built the homes first with promises to build golf courses and this later on, and a lot of times the developers never did that. So Del Webb, which was innovative for him and was really the success, was he made sure to build all that and have it there when you went to look for the home. So people who are going to buy or come to Sun City that day, they would see the rec center, they would see the golf course, they would see the model homes, and he made sure that they even had shopping centers and some businesses available there. They had a restaurant and a hotel. That was all built prior to January 1st, 1960.
Could you comment a little bit on the financing for this?
Well, I think if I can't really tell you how much it cost. I don't. Paul might know that.
Where did the money come from?
Del Webb owned 50%, and 51%, and the Boswell Company owned 49% of it. So the Boswell Company was kind of a silent partner. And the Boswell Company also still owned the land north of Grand Avenue, which we'll cover in a little bit when they wanted to expand north of that. But the financing came from, and I don't think Del Webb by that time had any problem with financing. He had built all of the hotels in Vegas. By that time, Vegas was Vegas. And if you go into our museum and you see the room of Del Webb, you'll see all the stuff he built. He got all his money from building air bases, military contracts. Then he moved into, obviously, the Yankees. Then he moved into building casinos. In 1960, when J. Edgar Hoover and Congress was looking into this new thing they called the mafia, they did know that there was a lot of money laundering going to Las Vegas. And Del Webb was actually testified at those hearings. When they first started having hearings at the mafia, Del Webb was brought in to testify because he built all these casinos and hotels for these mafias folks. And all he said was, I don't know what they do for a living, but they always pay me cash. His customers were happy with that, and within a couple years, Del Webb actually got a casino in Vegas. So if you look at all the old, I was looking at something yesterday from 1982, some films on Vegas, and the Del Webb's Mint was still there. I think right around the early 80s, the company sold it. But Del Webb, the Mint in downtown Las Vegas, was Del Webb's Mint. So that was his casino.
Who was the principal behind the Boswell companies?
I have no idea. They were from Northern California. I think the Boswell family, I think they were the principal owners. I think they had a lot of farming community up in Northern California. All right, so opening day. Again, they didn't know what to expect. They didn't think they were going to have a lot of folks come on out. And boy, were they surprised. They ran out of receipts. They had a couple of boxes or a couple of books of receipts. They figured they'd sell some homes. But this was opening day. So opening weekend was January 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1960. Opening day was very, very cold. There was a fountain that you'll see later on. It was a water fountain. It froze that morning. But the cars were backed up all the way to Peoria, several miles. So the interest right off from the very beginning was tremendous. So this is what was available on opening day. When you go to the museum, you walk in the first room. This is what you'll see, this picture. So they had a shopping center, had a Safeway store. Safeway did not want to open up. It's a brand new community. That was a big store. But because of Del Webb, and Del Webb had, a lot of pull. If they wanted to be in his community, they had to be open January 1st, and they were. 107th Avenue, Oakmont Recreation Center, golf course, and the 5 model homes. And again, the Del Webb Museum's in the very first one there. On this side, they had some a hotel, some vacation apartments. Del Webb pioneered that idea as well. He would let you come on out to Sun City. If you lived in Chicago in February, boy, what a great vacation. At a really bargain basement rate, you could stay at his hotels or his vacation apartments and enjoy the Sun City lifestyle. And by and large, it worked. They ended up buying a home before they left. This was a restaurant that Del Webb owned. His company, if you remember back, I think mainly in the Southwest, but he owned a string of restaurants and hotels called the King's Inn. Or I'm sorry, Highway House. It turned out to be, it eventually became the King's Inn, but the Highway House was Del Webb hotel chain that he owned. The very first day, very first weekend, over 100,000 people showed up. Cars were back 2 miles to Peoria. It was an immediate success. They had 237 home lots available, and they sold them all the very first weekend. First 3 days, total value of $2.5 million in property. The first model home, the Kentworth, which you can see right there, is again home to the Del Webb Sun Cities Museum. And if you go into the museum, you'll see this photo. It's one of the first ones that will greet you. I have a great story about this photo. In 2010, when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Sun City, the museum had an open house that day as well. We wanted to kind of emulate what people saw on January 1st, 1960, and we actually brought back a barbershop quartet on January 1st, 2010 that performed January 1st, 1960. But this picture is about this large in the museum. You walk in and it greets you. And I was in the living room, and I kid you not, a couple came in and said, "Oh, that's my mom and dad." So, and there are a lot of second and third generation residents now living in Sun City. So again, that's the first model home. It was the Kentworth. Sold for $8,500. This one, though, you had to pay a little extra because it was on the golf course. So this one sold for $10,000. And Paul, 865. What's the square footage on that? Do you know?
850.
850. Came with a swamp cooler. $600 extra. You can get AC. And funny story there. So $600, you got central air conditioning, which was, pretty much needed back then. We just had an air conditioner. We have 3 air conditioners on the house now, and one of them broke in July, and we paid $6,000, I think, for that one. So things have changed a little bit. This was the fountain I mentioned to you. This was a beautiful fountain. There have been a lot of different welcoming signs in Sun City over the years, and you'll see a couple of other ones. This one by far had to be the best. It was there for most of the 60s. And again, this froze over on January 1st. This was what was then called the Community Center. Now it's Oakmont Recreation Center. It was known for having a beautiful rose garden. And again, Del Webb's promise was that the amenities would be there when you bought your home. You didn't have to wait for that stuff to come, especially Sun City being, at the time, pretty far away from just about everything. There wasn't much in Peoria or Surprise, so he needed to have a grocery store right from the very, very start. All right, the growth through the years. It happened really quickly in the 90s. I need to ask you, do any of you live in Sun City? Okay. Can I ask you, when did you move? How long have you been in Sun City?
We lived here for 15. We bought the house 19 years ago.
Okay, all right. I like to ask that because, especially when I'm talking in Sun City, I'll see a show of hands from people who have lived here 5, 10, 15. And every once in a while I'll come across somebody who's been here 40, 50 years. And so they can take over my talk for me because they know it better than I do.
It's the one place we lived the longest.
Oh, really?
Like I was kind of up, so it's like, wait a minute, 10 years was the most.
Well, and you're going to see as we go through these photos, it's changed a little bit. Some things haven't changed, but other things have changed.
That fountain we just saw, is it still there?
No, they took that down. Now there's nothing there. I think there's 3 flagpoles. But the Sun City bound, that was the entrance into Sun City, and it's really not any longer. Sun City is on both sides of Grand. So this is Del Webb's Highway House, as I mentioned to you. It was a motel and restaurant. Later on, it changed to the King's Inn Center. It was torn down in 1989. It's right on the corner of 107th and Grand Avenue. Funny story that this building stood there for a long, long time, all the way through the 90s. And for the longest time, it was the King's Inn restaurant. We have a table from that restaurant in our museum. But if you go to that, now it's a Fry's grocery store. And pretty much where the Highway House King's Inn restaurant was at is now a KFC, Taco Bell. And right in front of that is a sign for the shopping center, and it's still called the King's Inn Shopping Center. So we get asked that quite a bit. It's like, why is it called King's Inn? Why isn't it called the Fry's? That's why. First grocery store, as I mentioned, Safeway at the time had a requirement that they would only open up in a community that had so many residents. Well, Sun City didn't have any at the time, but Del Webb, being Del Webb, convinced them that it was in their best interest to open up in one of his communities. First post office opened April 4th, 1960. Had a special first day cover, which was issued to 3,000 people, including President Eisenhower. Again, Del Webb had a lot of pull. He was very popular in the country, and so he got himself a stamp.
Where was the post office located?
It was by the Safeway grocery store. That was really the only businesses. You'll see it's moved around a lot too. But so there's a great Safeway grocery store. The post office was just, I think, to the right of that, but in that facility. This was the first year birthday party. Sun City loves to celebrate its anniversaries, and they still do. I was fortunate enough to be there for the 25th anniversary, which was a huge, huge celebration, 40th, 50th. But for the first few years, Del Webb would make a big deal because they still owned the community, and they would use it for marketing purposes, and they were great at promoting and marketing Sun City. This is the second set of model homes, which opened a year later, January 29th, 1961. This is at 105th and Peoria, just as successful. So at the far southern end of what was then Sun City, this is Peoria Avenue. That's 107th Avenue up there. This was the second recreation center, which is now Fairway Recreation Center. A new Fairway. It doesn't look like that anymore. And then these were the next model homes. This is the southern entrance to Sun City. Again, this is Peoria Avenue. That's Fairway Recreation Center. That sign stood there for many, many years, up until probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And somebody took it down, the rec centers or some county. And the museum, we were a little too slow. We were sleeping at the switch, but it would have been great to get that sign. I don't know where it went. First anniversary parade. This was along Peoria Avenue. And if you were sitting here today, you would see the thrift stores on the other side to the north. Don't know if you can really see it, but Del Webb is supposedly sitting somewhere in the stands there. So he was there for the first anniversary parade. And the Del Webb Company did love parades. I love this photo. This is the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce parade in 1961. They said they had over 300,000 people attend this parade, and Del Webb didn't miss the chance to promote Sun City with this little, and this was the slogan at the time, wake up and live. And so they had this little cart in the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce parade. The only reason I show this photo is look at where the people are sitting at the top there. It's like that can never happen today. I mean, they're just hanging their legs right over the top of this building to watch this parade. So, Sun City, the Del Webb Company really catered to the early residents. When they owned the community, they wanted to make sure that you had everything you needed. And this was one of the things they had for, I think, 15, 20 years. A shoplifter, it was a little trolley that would take people to the different grocery stores, take you to your appointments or whatever. I love the name, shoplifter. Sun City's second post office. So this one opened up in 1962. So take a look at this photo, and if you're familiar with Sun City, I challenge you, this building still exists. It looks nothing like this. It's been changed. In fact, just about 5 years ago, it got another facelift by the current owners. But the building is still there. And the cars that they use at that building are a lot bigger. Meant to carry somebody in the back. So this is now where McKeand Funeral Home is at. So if you're on 103rd and Coggins, which is where this building exists, it's now McKeand Funeral Home. but it was the second post office. Second anniversary, again, Sun City loved parties. Del Webb, and you'll see at the end of this, I've got a lot of great advertisements, but Del Webb Company heavily promoted Sun City throughout the entire country. They always showed residents active, smiling, and having fun. You'll see these ads at the end of the program, and every single ad showing people having fun in the sun. Because this actually was, I think, for a story that was run in Life magazine. Those are photographers from Life magazine taking a picture. How funny is that? They're all sitting in lawn chairs, but in the sun, because most of the ads they ran back then were geared towards people living in Chicago, New York, and they ran them in January, February, and March. So again, I'm going to show you some of these ads real quickly. When we talk about Sun City, the community that changed the nation, it really started with a lot of the advertisements that the Del Webb Corporation, and we have these in our museum. We have them online on our website. You can see dozens and dozens of these ads. What it did, if you, well, all of us remember, we can probably pull out pictures of our grandparents, and they're all, they look a lot older than. I mean, I'm 65, and I look at my grandma when she was 65, and I thought, man, she was 85. The image of retirees prior to Sun City, yeah, you're in your rocking chair, gray hair, horn-rimmed glasses, and you're going to be just sewing, and there really wasn't much else for you to do. Del Webb blew that concept right out of. I mean, they just changed the entire image of what it meant to be retired in the United States of America and throughout the world, quite honestly. So these are some of the ads, and they're just fantastic ads. Again, people being extremely active, with friends, smiling, and always in the sun. So some of these ads were just fantastic. And again, they were dispelling the image of what it meant to be retired. Because even in the 60s, you would hear people make fun of Sun City, all these old people, and these ads showed that wasn't the case. It made it a community that a lot of people really said, you know what, I want to be there. We love these ads. I mean, they're just fantastic. These were given to us by the Pulte company that now owns the Del Webb company. They didn't want them. And we just think they're great. And somebody who's been in the newspaper business for so long, I still think that these ads exemplify everything about a great ad. Now, most ads nowadays we look at are on our phone, right? They're on TV. We don't look at a lot of printed products. But for the print product, these were tremendous. Very simple, dominating photo, got your message across, a lot of white space. 5th anniversary of the 5th anniversary ball, January 9th, 1965. Again, another parade along Peoria Avenue. This was the 5th anniversary ball that same night, January 9th. 3,000 residents turned out for the ball. Del Webb with Mel and Etta Phelps. Mel died in 1987 at the age of 97. This is the Mount Joy model home, which sold for $12,750 in the mid-60s. Western landscaping was very, very popular with those who moved here from the Midwest. They didn't want to do yards. They didn't want to trim trees, and so that was very popular. This is Sun City's 3rd recreation center. The second one was Fairway up on 107th and Peoria. This was the 3rd one, Mountain View. Excuse me. This opened, it was called Town Hall South, but now it's Mountain View Recreation Center. It opened in 1967. Still looks a lot like that. It's got some extra tennis courts and a few other things. This is Rancho Estates. It opened in 1967. It's just north of Youngtown to the west. It's on the west side of Sun City in a little area. Webb thought that the larger 1-acre lots, a lot of horse property, would appeal to ranchers from Texas and other parts of the country. It's still really, really nice area. If you've ever gone over there, again, 1-acre lots, you can have a huge garage for your RV or auto collection. We've got a good supporter of the museum who is a member of the Cars Club in Sun City, and he has, I think, 4 or 5 antique vehicles on that property. Anybody know what this is? If you're in Sun City, they have an outdoor amphitheater, the Sun Bowl. So this is work began on the Sun Bowl in 1965. It was a 7,500 seat outdoor amphitheater, which eventually opened in 1967. Again, there must not have been OSHA back then at all. I don't know how they get away with this. I was in St. Louis a couple months ago, and I was watching a movie of them building the arch. Same thing. There was a guy up there. As they were bringing the two ends together, he was standing like this on both ends on top of the arch. I'm thinking, crazy, crazy. So that's the Sun Bowl. Opening day, January 1967, sellout crowd. Anybody want to guess who the opening performer was? Close, but no. 1967, who? Think of some people our grandparents just loved. Very close. Liberace was the opener. But Lawrence Welk did perform there quite a bit.
What was the time of year of this?
This was January 1967. That is the one downfall of the Sun Bowl is you can't do a whole lot June through September. If you come back in October when we talk about Sun City West, that was the prime reason they decided to build the Sun Dome. They wanted to be bigger and better than anything they built in Sun City, and the Sun Dome was meant to hold more people, but indoors, so that they could, in air-conditioned comfort, and they could have those concerts all year long. All right, so 1969, Sun City south of Grand is full. All of the land that Del Webb and Boswell had put together, or had earmarked for homes, totally sold. So that's what we call phase 1, is Grand Avenue, and that's when he decided to. Del Webb had an option to purchase some of Boswell's land north of Grand Avenue, and they did. 1969. So the second decade begins north of Grand Avenue. This is 107th Avenue looking north, which on that side of Grand Avenue is known as Del Webb Boulevard. Viewpoint Lake and Lookout Mountain. If you go to Lakeview Recreation Center, you'll see the man-made lake there, and the mountain, which is a really popular destination point. I don't know this, and Paul can correct me. I've heard that the mountain there was created by, of course, digging out the land for the lake. And across the street, there's a hospital that we're going to be showing you, Boswell Hospital, which is sunken down. And so digging out the land, the soil for that, to build the hospital down and the lake, they just tossed it all there and it made a little mountain. In 1969, this was Del Webb's newest and most elaborate model home sales pavilion. Again, this is the lake right there, and the homes they had built. You can tell phase 2 north of Grand Avenue because the neighborhoods are built in the circles. That's when you start to see the circle patterns in the neighborhoods. I believe these homes are all still there. They just got rid of the model home pavilion, but I think the homes themselves are there, or at least some of them. 1970, they start to build Sun City's first hospital. They had wanted a hospital for a number of years, and they had planned it in some different spots. They knew the community was growing. The State Medical Association wouldn't grant Sun City a license for a hospital. They didn't think it was large enough. But by 1969, 1970, they got approval. The community, the West Valley, was growing, and this was the beginning of Boswell Hospital. The circular design that you see, I've been told, was innovative for the time. So these are the first 2 towers, but eventually when it was completed, it had 4 towers, and you can still see it when you're on Grand Avenue. You can't see it from the other areas because they've added on to the Boswell Hospital, but from Grand Avenue, you can see the 4 circular towers. And although it may not have been the first one, I understand it was really innovative because up until that time, they weren't using the circular towers. And the whole purpose of the circular towers was so that the nursing station could be in the middle and they can look out and see all the rooms that surrounded them. But after that point, almost all the hospitals built were using that type of strategy. November 6, 1970, more than 5,000 turned out for the dedication of the first 2 towers. The 3rd tower was added in 1979 and the 4th in 1982. As I mentioned, they've changed welcoming signs throughout the time. By the early 70s, they had gotten rid of the fountain, and they constructed this wonderful sign, which didn't win a lot of hearts. This came from, of all places, Del Webb's casinos in Vegas, and it didn't last very long. It wasn't very popular at all. Didn't fit the culture of Sun City, I suppose. This is the construction of Sundial Recreation Center, and which is still there. And this is the sundial, which at the time was believed to be the largest sundial in North America. I don't know if there was a lot of contests for that. I don't know if they're building a lot of sundials, but and I think I heard from somebody not too long ago that when the rec centers in Sun City were redoing the Sundial Recreation Center, they thought about tearing this down because it really wasn't all that well built. As a lot of things by the 70s, Del Webb built things and then got a cardboard, for crying out loud, just to get it out. But this has been renovated and it's still there. Sun City Stadium opened in the mid-1970s. Again, Del Webb loved baseball. And even though by this time he no longer owned the Yankees, Sun City was home to the Milwaukee Brewers. They were part of the Cactus League. This stadium was located on the northwest corner of 111th and Grand. And you can, if you're heading out of Sun City towards El Mirage, Grand Avenue will be right about here. You can see the train tracks over there. This was home to the Milwaukee Brewers every single spring. And also you'll see it was home to a wonderful, very popular women's softball team, which was the national champions in 1979. So now this was torn down in the 2000s, primarily because by the 1990s, baseball had become, Cactus League had become huge business. Cities were really buying for these teams to come, and they were building these elaborate stadiums in Peoria, to serve 2 teams. Peoria had the 13-field complex. Surprise eventually had 13 fields. All these cities were wooing the teams away. Sun City's unincorporated. They had no ability to really negotiate with teams, and they didn't have any land to build extra stadiums, so they lost the Brewers. They lost the Brewers first to Chandler, and then I think the Brewers now play in Maryvale. This was torn down eventually, and now it's home to retirement apartments. Got the name. The Fountains. The Fountains are up on the where the parking lot was for the stadium, and the Fountains parking lot is where the field used to be. And if you ever drive by on Grand Avenue and you look over there and you see the Fountains, if you don't get into an accident, but if you keep looking, you will see this wall still exist around the parking lot.
Is that tower up in the far left corner? Is that the big tower that's still standing?
Yeah, that's the electric lines that run along the river bottom there. As I mentioned, one of the more popular teams in Sun City was the Sun City Saints, a women's softball team, national champions in 1979. I remember seeing them going to games in the summer, and they would draw huge crowds, even in the summertime. The games were always at night because the seats were aluminum, so you couldn't sit in them before it got dark. But very popular. We have a great exhibit at the museum on the Saints. Last year we had a a wonderful reunion of some of the Saints players. They came back to the museum, saw our exhibit. We filmed them getting together for the first time in many, many years. The Sun City Saints, again, were very popular as a softball team, but they had a cheerleading team too, and that is the start of the Sun City Palms.
Look at those legs.
So the Saints aren't there, the stadium's no longer there, but the Palms are still with us, and really became one of the more popular and famous ambassadors for Sun City and Sun City West. Some of the photos of the stadium, Hank Aaron, I still call him the home run champion, but he was, Barry Bonds overtook him a couple years ago, but at the time, he retired with the Brewers. He had played with the Milwaukee Braves, Atlanta Braves, but his final year, they sent him back to Milwaukee so he could play Milwaukee. So he was at Sun City Stadium his final year in spring training. Raleigh Fingers, the Brewers, and this is a photo that I took the day they were tearing the stadium down. Sun City celebrated the nation's bicentennial in 1976 by conducting a community-wide medal drive. Medal was collected in the parking lot of Sun City Stadium and sent to the same foundry in Denmark that created the nation's original Liberty Bell. The medal was melted down, and an exact replica of the Liberty Bell was cast in the exact same mold, which meant they had to actually physically put the crack in. So this is at Bell Recreation Center. At the time, I don't know if it still is, but for years they would say it's the only replica of the Liberty Bell that is open to the public. On July 4th, they have a Ring That Bell ceremony. They encourage people to go over there and ring the bell. You can do it any day, really. But so that's there. There's a time capsule buried in there that's set to open in 2026, and the museum is feverishly working to be the ones to be there to open it and display the objects in our museum. So 2026, mark your calendars. This is the annual 4th of July ceremony at Bell Recreation Center, the Ring the Bell ceremony. I think this photo is probably really old because the Del Webb statue now is over here, or I think right about in there. And the Del Webb statue, there you go. So, excuse me. That's it. A gentleman in Scottsdale actually made the statue, and that's him in his home in Scottsdale putting it together. And then the photo on the right was them helicoptering it in to put on the base. The Lakes Club, everybody know where the Lakes Club is at? So if you're on Thunderbird Avenue, now it's the Core Institute, but in a school too over there. Nursing school, Core Institute. So the Lakes Club was Sun City's largest and most elaborate private country club. It was destroyed by fire on February 17th, 1982, just really weeks before it was set to open up. It was totally rebuilt and opened 7 months later. Now it's home to Core, and Grand Canyon University was there. It's across the street from Boswell Hospital. It was a beautiful, beautiful country club, and it's too bad they still don't have it, but we've had presidents come to Sun City. When I was publisher of The Independent, people would always say, well, why don't you cover national news? And I said, well, if the president would come here, I'll cover them. Other than that, they're not going to get in our newspaper. Well, we did have two presidents who took me up on the offer. The first one, Ronald Reagan, this is Governor Reagan, visiting the Sun Bowl in 1976. But at this point, he was appearing for Gerald Ford. He was promoting Gerald Ford. A couple years later, in 1980, he came back, 1981, I believe it was, he came back as president, President Reagan, and made an honorary member of the Sun City Posse. In 1996, I think it was 96, Bill Clinton, running for re-election, came out to Sun City, and this was at Sundial Recreation Center. There's a huge crowd there that day, and I believe up until the the last election, he was the only Democrat to win Arizona, and I credit that visit to Sun City because at the time, Sun City and Sun City West, really held a lot of political power in our state. So it certainly didn't hurt him to come to Sun City. So I put this photo in there just for myself. This is my favorite photo that of all the photos I've taken in Sun City over the years, this was my favorite. So this is Lieutenant Bernard Vogel, 93 years old at the time. It was a Veterans Day program at the Sun Bowl. And he was, at that moment when I took the photo, the last surviving member of the group called the Sun City Youngtown World War I Barracks. So the last surviving member. And I put that in there because it's hard for any of us to even imagine, but someday, in the not too distant future, somebody in Sun City is going to take a picture of the last surviving World War II veteran. It's coming soon. And so when I took the picture, I thought nothing of it. But now, after all this time, I look at it and say, yeah, that's a pretty neat moment to take a picture of the last surviving World War I veteran in this community. So, changing the definition of retirement, the Sun City lifestyle, as the Beach Boys say, fun, 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 and it still has remained that way. People who move to Sun City, and I know this from my own relatives, if you move to Sun City with the intention that you're going to stay active and you're going to make friends and you're going to stay busy, it's a great community. If you move to this community thinking, you know what, just like any place else, I can just sit and watch TV all day, not the right community for you. But you will stay younger if you're out there and you're doing things. I mean, the fact that you're all here today shows me that, yeah, we want to get out there and do something in Sun City. So just a few other extra photos here. As I mentioned, Del Webb, and the people who took a lot of these photos, and I should explain to you how we got them, but the people who took these photos, one of the gentlemen, Don Tufts, was our president of our board the last 2 or 3 years. And they said every photo they took, they had in their mind that someone back in the Midwest in the middle of January was going to look at that photo, and they wanted the photo to sell itself. And so, you look at this and, I mean, my gosh, it's just great. We got these photos. It's a great story. So when Del Webb was all done building Sun City, so it would have been about 1986, 85, they had already turned their attention to Sun City West. They had offices in Sun City West, and they wanted to get out of their offices in Sun City. And the offices were right on Bell and Boswell, those big yellow buildings. And they just moved on over to Sun City West. And sitting in the office were all these great photos from the first 25, 30 years of Sun City. And someone at Del Webb, I don't know who it was, they certainly deserved to be fired, but they just took all these photos and threw them in the dumpster. A lady who turned out to be the founder of our historical society, Jane Freeman, heard about that and literally jumped in those dumpsters with a few friends, rescued all these photos, and they're now sitting in file cabinets as really the basis for the Sun City's Area Historical Society and the Del Webb Sun City Museum. We're in the process, we have a team of researchers who are scanning them all and putting them online. So if you go to the Del Webb Sun City Museum website, which I'll show you that in a few seconds, you can get a lot of these. We have a lot of Sun City West. We're still in the process of, we have so many from Sun City, but and thank you, Paul, because Paul's in charge of our website. If you go there, if you want more of what I've shared with you today, which what I've shared is just a little bit, you could sit on our website for days and days and days and just be immersed in great Sun City history. Another great, if you're sitting in Chicago on January 20th and you're snowbound, you can't get out of the house and you see this photo. That's all they had to do. I throw this in there just because, price of gas, this was taken in, I think, 1962 or 63. I didn't doctor it. That's actually the price of gas back then.
And where was that gas station?
That was on the corner of, I believe it was, either 107th and Grand, where the Starbucks is now, or it might have been 111th. It might have been 111th and Grand, right there in Sun City, Youngtown. I'm not really sure. You know, having fun. I throw this picture in there because the clubs and the organizations have really been the key to successful or active adult retirement living in Sun City. They have a club for everything, and have changed over the years. In the 60s, yeah, you would have a lot of metal clubs and rock clubs making bow ties and sewing clubs. Now you have computer clubs and a lot of other different things. The Lilani Hawaiian dancers were real popular back in the 60s, and not just with the women, but with the dudes too. So, again, just some really quick fun photos, all staged by the great Del Webb photographers, but they were staged with a purpose, and they weren't really, you know, it wasn't false advertising. This was the theater club. I don't know if it was the Sun City Players, but they staged this photo with them at Oakmont Recreation Center, or it might have been Fairway. But, you know, the theater group was very active back then. Of course, Sun City golf. Oh, you know, I mentioned about the golf. Del Webb was really smart in how he marketed Sun City. Golf was always a huge part of Sun City and Sun City West. And for many years, you know how folks come out. You know, the weekend of the Super Bowl, we always watch the Phoenix Open, right? And again, if you can imagine people in the Midwest in February looking at these beautiful palm trees and sunny weather and people walking around with their shirts off and everything, they say that Phoenix Open is great marketing for Phoenix. Del Webb did that too. In the spring, for many, many years, he would have a PGA golf tournament in Sun City, and then he moved it to Sun City West. And it was just free advertising because it was beautiful. Again, just some great photos. People always smiling, always with friends, always in the sunshine, and you know, just doing fun stuff. Some more of the ads. I think that In Love All Over Again is really, to me, the most powerful ad because, you know, again, I just retired a couple years ago. You know, you work your whole life. Married to the same person, and you know, you raise a family, you do your work stuff, and when you retire, you know, all of a sudden it's just like you're teenagers again, right? And when you have something to do, it can really be meaningful in your life.
Were these ads made by an in-house agency, or did they use another agency?
No, they did them all in-house. That's why we were shocked when they said we don't want these anymore, because they're like, well, they're fantastic. Maybe your company should should use some of these. They didn't want anything to do with it. Just, again, photos. You'll see these at the museum. One of the things at the museum, on the outside, you'll see two golf carts from the 60s, one right now, his and hers. Hers just came back. His is being renovated right now, so you see one. But one of them, the hers, is very similar to that one. I think it's that one. It's a Cushman 3-wheel golf cart from the 60s. You know, again, the whole point of active adult retirement community is there's stuff for you to do all the time. Even if you don't want to do anything, you can just relax.
Was there fishing at that time?
Yeah, I think in the golf course lakes, you know, before they even had Viewpoint Lake, I think you could probably fish. And you're in Arizona, so you're not too far from. So, Del Webb Sun City Museum. I put this in there not only to promote the museum, but to tell a very funny story. So you saw early on that Del Webb started building Sun City in July of 1959, and within 4 months later, January 1st, 1960, they had all of that stuff, 5 homes, a rec center, restaurant, golf course, you know, vacation homes, all that stuff was ready in 4 months' time. I was on the board in 2010, I think it was, 2009, and somebody on the board had the great idea of we need to build a sign. This sign is in front of the museum. It's by about 4 feet high, I don't know, 4 feet wide or whatever. And it took us over a year to get a permit, to get the permit in the county to build this sign. So things have changed. We just should have went out and built it, right? Let them come and complain, but we were. So anyway, museum today.
Excuse me, on that sign, it almost looks like the wheel there is the same one, or similar to the one on the casino.
Well, that is the logo, the Sun City logo that Del Webb had created, and I believe we have permission to use it because they still use it. They still Pulte owns the Del Webb communities, and I think they still use that, and they get really territorial. But we have permission to use that pinwheel, and we do. So that's the Del Webb Sun City Museum in its beautiful pink. The day it opened, it was pink. One of the trustees on our board, Barb Wagers, her grandmother was one of the original owners of that home, and she would come out in the 60s when she was just, a young girl and, spend time with her grandmother. And she's the one who said, you know what, that house used to be pink. And so she and her family actually paid to repaint the house pink. And that's what it looks like today. It is on the National Register of Historic Places, so we can't do a whole lot to the original home, although you're going to see that we did add a wing to the back. But because we can't change the original home, certain restrictions to be on the Register of Historic Places, we built the house in the back, and we just have a little hallway connecting the two buildings. So we have, the living room is restored to what a home would have looked like in the 1960s. Beautiful carpet, which my dad still has in his house in Sun City. Never changed it. And I don't think he's a lover of history. I just don't think he ever wanted to change it. Some of the displays, we salute some of the organizations. That's the entrance I was telling you. When you walk into the building, we've got Del Webb. You can push a button here. Del Webb talk about how, of all the things he did in his life, the Yankees, casinos, building Luke Air Force building, everything, hospitals, Madison Square Garden, his most proudest accomplishment was building Sun City. So you see that. We have this very popular attraction when TVs were pieces of furniture. We all remember that. The kitchen, again in pink. And the stove doesn't work, refrigerator does. Original 1960s vintage model. We have to de-ice it with a hair dryer now and then, but it works really well. There's the display I mentioned about the Sun City Saints, some of their trophies and what they do. And these exhibits change quite often. We come up with new ones all the time. That's the collection of baseball bats signed by so many of the New York Yankees in the 50s and 60s. This is the Del Webb room. We have a lot of his personal mementos and items from his family. He was married twice, but he never had any children. So the Del Webb Foundation has really been generous to us and given us a lot of his diaries, and we have a lot of stuff from him. The Sundome Junior Theater.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Is there a biography of Del Webb, the man?
No, not yet. There is the Del Webb Company created something. There's a book in our museum that we sell that was created by the Del Webb Company, and it's very, very good. But it is, it's one-sided for the most part. But it is really good. It talks a lot about what Del Webb has done, but hasn't been really a major, independent biography done of him. He's done quite a bit. You can't go through the last century without seeing his mark on construction, certainly retirement communities. So the Sundome Junior. Anybody here live in Sun City West? Ever been to the Sundome? A wonderful facility, as I mentioned. When they built Sun City West, they wanted to build an indoor theater. At the time, it was the largest single-level theater in all of North America. Beautiful facility, but it became outdated pretty quick. And by within 20 years, it opened in 1980, and Lawrence Welk was the first performer there. But by the mid 20, I don't know when it closed, but it just became outdated, and they couldn't update. It was when Del Webb left Sun City West, they turned it over to the residents didn't want it, the rec centers didn't want it because they knew there were a lot of repairs and renovations needed. So they ended up giving it to the county, then ASU, and then back to the county. And long story short, they sold the property, and now it's the Fry's grocery stores where Sundome sits. However, we do have several seats from the Sundome, and they're in our museum now, and we think they're the last remaining seats. Won't tell you how we got them. I don't think it was legal, but we got them. And they're in there, and we have a really, and this has moved. This was the old, we had this in a small place in the museum. Now we've moved it over to one of the bedrooms, and it's a beautiful facility where we show films, and we'll be showing more and more films too. So if you ever get a chance to the museum, it's a beautiful place. Sit down, enjoy the Sundome seats, and close your eyes, and you might think you're in a huge 7,000 seat facility. So there you go. That's the Del Webb Sun City Museum. There's our website. You can visit the website and see everything, a lot more than what's at the museum. You can also very easily at the website join the museum. We are a nonprofit. We have a part-time office manager, but everybody else on the board, all our docents are all volunteers. And we exist really entirely from membership fees and grants. So we'd love to have you join the museum. We charge for visits. If you become a member, it's free. You can walk in that museum anytime you want, and no charge. So, questions?
On the website, are the photos easily downloadable?
Yes and no. So you can download them, but they'll be in low resolution. Because again, as a nonprofit, those photos are really our goal. That's what we have, and we want people to use them, but we want them to pay for them. So we do have a lot of businesses in Sun City and Sun City West. You walk in there and you'll see those photos on the wall. It's a moneymaker for us. And we don't charge a lot. But yeah, and we also don't want people to download them and start using them on the internet everywhere. And it's our property, and so we try to guard it. So they're there. I think there's a watermark on some of those. I'm not really sure. But at the very least, if you download them, they'll be pretty low resolution. You could probably get by with throwing them on your Facebook page, but I wouldn't print them out and frame them put them on the wall.
I want to ask you many questions, but
No, go ahead.
I'm really interested in where the idea of an active retirement came from, how it emerged. Did somebody tell that to Del Webb at a cocktail party, or where did it come from? Architectural?
Well, a good question.
Where did this idea come from?
One of the things we have in some of our presentations is Del Webb himself was watching the Dave Garroway show in 1955 when they did an entire segment on Youngtown. And that caught his interest. He thought, well, because he was in the development business, and he was building communities. Primarily, he was building communities, residential communities, around air bases. And and those air bases, communities, he built one in San Manuel, Arizona. It was a mining community. And when you're way out in the desert, you have to build communities that are self-contained, pretty much. Shopping centers, schools, parks. And so he was already doing that. But when he saw the segment on the NBC Today show, which was Dave Garroway at the time, it did pique his interest. And he sent his people out to look into it. And they thought, you know what, there are a lot of people retiring, more and more people. It's a good segment of the market that no one was really going after. By 1960, Social Security had been a thing for, 20 years? 25? I'm not sure. It was in the 30s when that was enacted, right? But, and there still were people that were retiring with some pensions. So I think it was enough for him to think about it. There were retirement communities being built in Florida. But again, and that's why he sent his people there to survey and try to figure out what people liked and didn't like. And none of them appreciated the fact that developers would say, this is what you're going to get, and they never got it. So, and even like I say, on January 1st, 1960, I don't think anybody in his company thought this was going to be a rip-roaring success. They, were really shocked.
When did Del Webb die?
He died in 1974, July 4th, 1974. that correct? Yep.
Who took over as CEO?
John Meeker? I get him kind of confused. John Meeker was already in charge of Sun City. I mean, I don't know who took over the Del Webb Corporation. It might have been Meeker, but John Meeker took over the running of Sun City in the mid-'60s, because there was a time in the mid-'60s when they weren't selling as many homes. And it wasn't as glorious as it was in the early '60s, and John Meeker came in and turned that all around. And it was John Meeker who also turned the company's attention to Sun City West. And so he was running the Del Webb, or at least the Del Webb Development Company, DevCo, by that time.
And then R.H. Johnson, he got to be involved as well.
He did. He took over for Meeker. And then Kuntz, Fred Kuntz. Sun City West, yeah, we were much better in Sun City. I should say by the time those guys took over after Del Webb died, Del Webb would never, he was a bit modest, and they didn't name streets after their employees, but that all changed in Sun City West. So they were very vain about what they were doing over there and named rec centers and streets themselves after themselves.
How many Sun Cities Del Webb?
Oh gosh. When they opened Sun City, Arizona, they soon opened one in Florida and one in California. So for most of the '60s, there were only 3. I think they only had the 3 until they opened Sun City West. But when I think it was after they sold to Pulte is when they proliferated, and they have Sun Cities all over the country now. I mean, I don't know, I couldn't even tell you how many they have. Not as big as this one, of course. They're really just small communities. Here in Arizona, they had opened Sun City Grand, and now it's just Grand, I guess. They took the Sun City name off. There's Sun City Festival, which is out in Buckeye, Sun City Surprise. There's another one out by Queen Creek, another Sun City Festival out that way, or Anthem was built by the Del Webb Company. So I couldn't tell you how many today, but the Pulte Company owns Del Webb Communities now, and they'll still call some of them Sun City, but they're not, which benefits us, because it's funny that people will see the name Sun City, they'll look in, they're all over the country, but they let them come back to this one and end up buying a home here. So.
What was your presentation on Sun City West?
It's real similar. It talks about the history of Sun City West.
When is it?
Oh, it's October 25th. And I'll be on time for that one, I promise you.
I wasn't on time.
Yeah, and that one is, it's real similar. We show a lot of photos of the growth of Sun City from day one. A lot about the Sun Dome. The Sun Dome is just, when I give that talk, it's the number one question from people is they want to know more about the Sun Dome. We had a lot of wonderful, it was a great venue. I saw a lot of great acts there. Jerry Lewis, Bob Hope, Milton Berle, John Denver. I thought it was a great facility. But as time went on, artists wanted more elaborate lighting and stage. They couldn't do the great stage productions from Broadway productions. They just couldn't do it without updating the facility, and they just didn't have the money to do it. So.
Could you comment on why Sun City or Sun City West was not turned into a government-owned entity with a mayor or something like that?
Well, it's not for lack of trying. I think, I know for all the years I was the editor and publisher, that was the number one argument, incorporation. And they did have I know Sun City West had at least one vote. Sun City might have had one vote, but it came up a lot. But the residents just didn't want to do it. They're under the control of the county, and I think they all just felt like they didn't want it. They had come from someplace else that had political issues, governments, mayors and people being paid and all the different departments, and they just felt like they didn't want to do it. In Sun City especially, and I think rightfully so, they were very proud of the volunteer spirit that was out here. And it's still out here, but I remember in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, there was services for everything. I mean, they had a local dial-a-ride, and they just had everything. Had a community fund for people who, who needed extra money. They just had volunteers doing everything. You have the posse, the prides. So I just, and I don't think it's really been I don't think it's come up in 10, 20 years, but for a while it was really, really, really heated issue. And, who knows? And it's up to the residents to vote on it. And at the time, there wasn't any surrounding growth. Peoria and Surprise did not come up to the boundaries of Sun City or Sun City West. And so I think they always just felt like, well, we're fine out here. But who knows how they would feel today with all the surrounding growth. But the county takes care of the roads, takes care of the medians, the rec centers, take care of all the facilities. I mean, you pay for that. So that's really, the closest thing to the government. I think in Sun City West, the rec centers took over the CC&R enforcement. Sun City, they still have the homeowners group. So, I suppose you can make an argument that you've got everything you need and right here locally.
Sun City dues are about half of Sun City West.
Yeah, they always have been. So when Sun City West opened, you'll hear in that talk that I give, in 1978 when they opened up with the one rec center, the dues were $60 a year, and people thought, oh my gosh, that's horrible. That's just way too expensive. They were only paying $30 in Sun City at the time, but $60. And people went crazy over that. They're like, you're never going to sell any homes in Sun City West at that rate.
Will your presentation be here?
Yes. And we have a speakers bureau that has, we have a couple other topics. And we're getting them on the schedule right now. If you have a club or an organization that needs a speaker, we have the Sun City West talk. We have a great talk on Del Webb, the man, the myth, the legend. It really goes in depth of his career. We have a couple other talks about the farming community in Sun City and one on Boswell. The Boswell name is real popular here in Sun City and Arizona, not so much popular in Northern California. If you came from Northern California, they're not real popular. They stole all the water up north. It's still an issue. There's a great book and a movie, a PBS documentary that came out 10 years ago called Cadillac Desert. It talks about the struggle for the water in the West, the Colorado River water, and the 7 states that bought into the CAP, California getting, 10 times as much as anybody else, and a lot of that was because of the Boswell family. They own most of the farming community up there in northern Arizona, California. They still do. And, it's just a constant battle between the individual farmers and the residential communities and the farming communities. And it's almost like oil. I mean, they will do anything to get their hands and the rights to that water. So, any other questions? Again, I apologize for being late.